Hello, everyone. So delighted that you could be here today. We are here with our friend Dan Gingiss, and of course, you know Rachel Durkin. So Dan is an international keynote speaker. He is a customer experience expert and coach, and he has worked with some amazing corporate names. We wrote him up in the event registration. I'm not going to get too far into that. The part that I like is he is a customer experience expert. He believes your customer experience is your best marketing strategy. I have to completely agree. We all know positive news. I don't know if we all know this, but positive news spreads a lot quicker than negative news. So if you can go out of your way for a customer, that's going to come back to you in spades. We'll talk more about this. But Dan, as a native Chicagoan, get that right? Chicagoan, is also a lifelong, of course, Chicago Cubs fan. He is a licensed bartender, and I always like to point out he is a pinball wizard. Come on, how great is that? Dan, next time you get to Jersey, we'll have to take you. There are a couple of pinball museums here.
Oh, I would love to do that.
Yeah,
you can make us drinks first and then afterwards.
Yes, pinball's always more fun when you have a drink in your hand.
Absolutely. Sure. And because it's a museum and you get a wristband, you don't have to worry about tilting the machine. You can see how far you can go with that, which is all part of the pinball strategy. Anyway, we are not here to talk about pinball. So, and those of you who have been joining us for a while know that Dan was here back in March of 2021. Rachel, this is our 2-year anniversary.
It makes me
all
feel
right.
I know. So when I decided that I really wanted to talk about creating a culture where everyone sells, I really wanted to get Dan involved in the conversation because I believe this does come down to two things. It is creating a culture in your company where everyone is informed, where there is cross collaboration, and then how does everyone in the organization create an extraordinary customer experience so that everyone is identifying opportunities for the company. So here we are, and this is what we're going to talk about. So here's how it's going to go. We're going to talk about today's landscape. We're going to talk about culture. We're going to talk about customer experience. And then probably most importantly, we're going to talk about how to put it into action, because those of you who know me know, I do not believe that knowledge is power. I believe applied knowledge is power. So here's how I see today's landscape. And one of the reasons I think this is so important. It is an incredibly noisy. I don't think we've ever had more content. Our brain can't possibly process everything that's coming at us. As the company who's out there, trying to get my message across, I have to figure out ways to stand out. It's noisy, it's crowded. That's the marketplace. And now we've got this workforce that post-COVID is mostly remote, which, work from home is turning into back to the office or whatever you want to call it, because it's really difficult to be working in isolation. We're just not meant to do it. So this landscape that we're in today is really counter to building culture and creating customer experience. So that makes it even more important. That's kind of how I'm seeing it. Dan, what are you seeing? You're out there in the corporate world, you're working with clients. What are you seeing kind of where today is post-COVID?
Well, the interesting thing about the pandemic is it actually shined a much brighter light on both customer experience and employee experience. And the light was already there, but I think it's now even more important coming out of the pandemic. What we learned during the pandemic was which companies were there for us as consumers and as employees, and which ones weren't. And we made a lot of decisions, consumers made and employees made a lot of decisions based on that. And that's why you saw the so much brand switching from a consumer perspective, and you saw the quiet quitting phenomenon and the actual quitting phenomenon from an employee standpoint. So now that we are here, it's important for us to realize that customer experience and employee experience are inextricably linked. Now, a lot of people will say happy employees equal happy customers, which I think is a good math equation, but I go to a different math symbol. Don't worry, it's not much harder. I go to the infinity symbol because I think that employee experience and customer experience are continuously moving and they are continuously feeding each other. So as we have happier customers, it makes our employees' jobs easier because it's always nicer and fun to handle a happy customer than an angry customer. And so now our employees like their jobs better. And when they like their jobs better, what do? They provide a better experience for customers. And so now our customers are seeing that they have a better experience with us, which makes them even happier, and on we go.
Absolutely.
A different way to look at it is to say that we can't ask employees to create great experiences for customers if they don't know what a great experience looks like. And so as employers, it's really our job to show them, here's what a great experience looks like. See how that feels? You like that feeling? Good. Help us make that feeling for our customers.
Right. Right. Absolutely. And we'll talk about ways to empower our team. So Rachel, from where you sit, the sales and marketing, how's all this kind of affecting what's going on in your world?
So I wanted to add on to one thing that Dan just said is happy employees equals happy customers. But I also find that training your employees is also incredibly important to that. So putting people out just because they're happy doesn't mean that they're able to provide the right experience or say the right thing. So one of the things that I think is the most important is this concept of alignment in your messaging. So we do a lot of exercises with our clients and with ourselves where we'll go out and we'll say, okay, if you're sitting at the dinner table or Thanksgiving and your uncle asks you what you do and what company you work for, can you articulate the value proposition of that company in the exact same way as somebody else on the team might? So is my developer going to say the same thing as my workflow strategist, who's going to say the same thing as my marketing strategist? And what we found, and what I always find if there's not training involved, is that everybody says something different because their perceptions of their jobs and what they do is different every day. So making sure Donnie, you talk a lot about mission, vision, values, and those definitely have to be in alignment. But where I come from, it's about the messaging strategy, which is what I call value propositions. What is the value that the company brings to the customer? And is everybody drinking that Kool-Aid and actually understand it at the drop of a hat? So that level of training and alignment is so important. And it has to be an ongoing process.
You know, I agree. And I think that because I am the kind of person that I am, I see opportunity in every challenge. So when we have this challenge of the great resignation and quiet quitting and remote working and not having the touches, the literal touches that we used to have, you know, I see it as an opportunity. And I do think that's where mission, values, vision comes in. And, you know, I think the truth is it's really simple, but not necessarily easy. So to me, your mission, values, vision, very simply. And by the way, in the chat, drop me a 1 if you have a written mission, values, vision statement. Very simply, the way I see this, thank you, Dan, appreciate the backup. The way I see this, really simple. Mission, what do you do? Values, what do you stand for? Vision, where are you going? This is a very simple explanation of what a mission, values, vision is, but the reality is you have to document it. And it's kind of like Rachel was talking about with your selling proposition. It's an alignment tool. Once you get clear on what you do, what you stand for, and where you're going, every decision you make gets held to that criteria, to those values, to that mission. Whether you're hiring people, whether you're deciding what kind of marketing activities to do. And what I have found is, so C3 Workplace, my main company, connect, collaborate, community. We realized about 10 years in, that was our secret sauce. And what we've done is we've built an organization that attracts like-valued people. We believe in the power of connection and we live it out loud. So it's not enough to just have your mission, values, vision statement. You have to live it out loud. And Dan is here about customer experience. And so Dan, I believe that living your mission, values, vision out loud is your customer experience. So talk to us about creating that amazing customer experience and your wiser strategy for how to do that.
Sure, and I completely agree with you. If your mission and your values don't have anything to do with the customer, then you're probably looking in the wrong direction, right?
Exactly.
And so certainly the customer, I'd love you to work the word customer into the mission, the vision, and the values in some way. Because as I like to remind people, without customers, we do not have a business. So it is our number one asset, right? And so we have to nurture that. So the wiser methodology is a way to think about creating the kinds of experiences that people want to share, that they want to talk about. Because as we said earlier, when people are talking about us in a positive way, that is news that spreads. All you got to do is look at your Instagram feed to see how much positivity people want to share. We want to share the best versions of ourselves. And so when something cool happens in our life, we want to share that. If you're not a social media person, we still want to share it with friends, family, co-workers. That is also very important sharing. It doesn't have to be that you have 1 million followers and that's what, and that's the outcome. It could just be that you tell your neighbor you had a great experience at a certain grocery store, and now you've changed your neighbor's opinion of which grocery store they're going to go shop at. So the wiser methodology, the first part is being wise to customer experience. And these are 4 things that you can do to create experiences that people want to talk about. W is being witty. And witty is not about being hysterical or a stand-up comedian. It's just about being clever. It's about using every communication opportunity as a chance to have a little bit more fun, to be a little bit more creative, to be more human sounding than just business sounding. It's about using language to our advantage. And my favorite part is it's about refusing to be boring. There are so many people that come up to me and say, yeah, but I'm in a boring industry. I can't do this. Well, guess what? Let's make it unboring. It doesn't have to be boring. There's no law that says that it has to be boring. And I've seen tons of companies that are in otherwise boring industries have some really fun parts of the experience, and especially in the communications, that take people by surprise, and therefore they're memorable. Immersive is the I in wise, and that's about appealing to people's emotions or to their 5 senses so that they really feel the experience. They're not just in it, but they're a part of it, and it becomes a part of them. So here you want to think about the whole journey of the customer and ensuring that it's consistent, that it looks like the same brand all along, that whether you're getting something from the marketing department or you're calling customer service, it feels like the same company, right? Where we've all had situations where, you see an ad and then you call customer service and the customer service has no idea that this ad even existed, right? That's, a weird problem to make the customer have to solve. So being immersive is really about finding those opportunities to appeal to either emotion or the 5 senses. Then we get to shareable, which is one of the outcomes, but shareable doesn't happen in a vacuum. It doesn't happen by accident. It also doesn't happen as much as you might think just because we ask for it. So my skin always crawls a little bit when I see, follow us on Instagram and use our hashtag and don't forget to tag us and take a picture of this selfie station. And it's like, there's way too many instructions. And what you realize is you're just asking the customer to do something for you, not for them.
Yeah.
The opposite of that is that moment that we've all had, every one of us has had, where we pull this thing out because we just have to capture this moment. Nobody told us to do it, but we're like, OMG, I got to remember this. And maybe I just need to keep it in my photo reel to remember myself. But maybe I want to send it to my kids or my parents or my siblings. Maybe I want to share it with people at work. Maybe I have 1 million followers on Instagram and I want to put it on Instagram. Regardless, it's that moment that we've all had where we cannot help ourselves. We must take a picture of this. That's when you have a shareable experience. And sometimes companies are worried about this. Sometimes they go into it saying, we don't want people to take a picture of this. I want you to turn that around and say, how do we get people to take a picture of this? How do we get them to want to share this? And when you think about it in that opposite way, that's when the creativity starts flowing in terms of ways in which to get them interested. Finally, there's the E in WISE, which stands for extraordinary. Now, this is a fun one because most of your competitors, maybe all of your competitors, are likely ordinary, average, not a whole lot better than that. And the good news is customers don't share average experiences. They only share experiences that stand out to them, either positively or negatively. So being extraordinary just simply means, by definition, a little bit better than ordinary. You don't have to be miles above ordinary. You don't have to spend millions of dollars per customer to be extraordinary. You can just be a little bit different. And the best way to do this is to stop looking at your competitors for inspiration, because you're not going to find it there. And to start looking at other industries. Go to an amusement park, go to a movie theater, go to a swimming pool, go shopping, go to a restaurant, get on an airplane, go to a hotel. Any of those places are going to give you really good ideas that you can then come back and implement in a similar way in your business, versus what tends to be our main way of thinking, which is, well, let's just see what the other guys are doing. And that's not generally going to get you to as good of a place. Once you are wise, you will start to see that people are talking about you more often. And that's when we bring in the R, which is being responsive. And that's so critical, because when people take time out of their day and use up their social capital to get onto social media or write a review and talk about you, you want to be part of that conversation. And even if it's as simple as saying, hey, we love you too, Donna, thanks so much for being a customer, that's going to make Donna's day, even though she's already happy because she's already posting something nice about you. But knowing that the company's listening and that they love her back and that they are responding means so much to people. And so we've got to be willing to have this two-way conversation with our customers. And I guess one other thing would be that responsive could also be just listening to customer service phone calls or survey responses or internal ways that customers are talking to us, and making sure that we are talking back, that it is a two-way conversation.
Amazing. And truthfully, I often say this, it's never the one big thing you do, it's the 100 little things you do. And you talk about customer experience in kind of a consumer directed way. But the truth is, a lot of our audience is business to business, but it's the exact same thing.
Yes, it is.
The exact same thing. Creating these nurturing touch points. Rachel, you talk about this all the time. It takes 7 to 11 touch points. Well, how can you make those touch points something out of the ordinary? That's extraordinary, right? So, I mean, and that's how we drive referrals. And we all know referrals are the lifeblood of all our businesses, and they have a much higher close ratio. So that's why I love this whole concept of creating extraordinary, wiser customer experience.
You
and
know,
again,
Donna,
yes.
just to jump in for one quick second.
Sure.
For all the B2Bs out there, the people that are buying your product or service, they are consumers in their real lives. They might not be acting as a consumer with you, but last night they went to dinner with their significant other and had an amazing time, and the food was incredible and the experience was amazing and the atmosphere was great. And whether you think it's fair or not, the experience they're having with you right now is being compared to that. If you are a B2B, if you have an online aspect to your business, you are getting compared to Amazon. Sorry, you may not like that, but Amazon is the gold standard for how easy it is to do business with companies. And so you're getting compared to that. So stop looking at your customers as not being consumers, because they are. And so that's how you bridge this gap when you start to think, well, Dan's only talking about consumers. Yes, and
We are.
buyers are consumers.
I just want to echo that for a second. They since moved on and we have somebody new in the role, but we had a creative director who was very, very talented. And they were all about like the design and the emotion that it provoked, but they didn't always want to do what the customer wanted. And the experience was good, but it wasn't great. The outcome was great. The experience was good. And what I came to realize was the outcome being great, I would have happily switched that and had a great experience with a good outcome. And I think that we would have had happier customers. I'm not saying that mediocrity is something that you should be shooting for here. But my point is that when I'm talking to my team on a regular basis, everybody on my team, I tell them that half of our job, when we're dealing in a B2B environment, is creating a good experience. The outcome is important, but the good experience along the way, if we didn't produce that, the outcome really in the end doesn't matter as much. So for any B2B environment, I would say that make sure your team knows that half of the rate of success, at least, is the experience of the customer and not what's being produced.
Right.
You know, Rachel, for my book, I interviewed an Iron Chef, Stephanie Izard. And she told me, I asked her about this very question. And I expected, since she's a chef, I
Yeah.
expected a different answer. I said, if you were looking at the relative importance of the quality of the meal and the quality of the experience, where would you, how would you apportion it? And I swear I expected her to say 80-20 food, 70-30 food.
No,
She said 50-50.
it is. It really is.
And so you're totally spot on.
Yeah.
I think in every business, that's true.
I agree. So coming back to the reason we're here, we're talking about building a culture where everyone sells. Now, that kind of may make the hairs on the back of your neck stand up, because some of you feel like you are not salespeople. But when you create a culture where you are empowering people to deliver exceptional customer service, where they understand your value proposition and where they understand what pain looks like, every single one of them has the opportunity to produce leads for your business. Somebody else can close them. So to me, really, I just want to spend a few minutes. This starts with the mission, values, vision. Culture is the soil of your firm. So you have to create the mission, values, vision that empowers people to know that this is part of their job. This is part of how they contribute to the extraordinary experience that your company is delivering. And I always, when I work with a company on doing a mission, values, vision, it's always a full team exercise. We may have a leadership team that kind of dictates direction, but I like to start by getting everyone on the team to identify their top 3 values, because you have to know who you are to be able to fit into an organization. And then we look at the organization's values, we look at what they do, and then we look at where they're going. So if we get everyone involved in the process, that creates something that I think is pivotal to everything we're talking about, which is ownership. In order for every person on your team to identify an opportunity to create an extraordinary experience, they have to feel like they own it. They have to feel like they have skin in the game. That, to me, is probably the biggest reason for getting your mission, values, vision documented, and then creating a committee within your company. Could be you and your kids, who knows? That might be the committee. But the truth is, it's one thing to create it, but unless you live it out loud, unless you find 50 different ways to incorporate that into everything you're doing, there's just no point in the exercise. So for me, this mission, values, vision, I often say, people know this, I'm in business almost 30 years. For the first 10 years, I did a fantastically accelerated job of becoming the world's greatest micromanager. There was no situation I couldn't make worse. And that's the culture that I built. So of course, everyone was afraid to do anything. And then I underwent a process of bringing in outside help and really transforming the company into a place where, I have to say, I'm very proud of having a successful company, but I'm even more proud of the fact that everyone loves coming to work. They love what we do. And part of living out your mission, values, vision is creating the space for your team to collaborate. It could be on a particular initiative. It could be, hey, how did we live this value out loud this week? Hey, are we on mission? We closed a piece of business. Let's all celebrate. And I think that when you're able to create that environment, the upside potential is enormous. So the time invested is minimal compared to what you will get out of it. And, I talk a lot about collaboration, obviously. Rachel, you often talk about the culture of collaboration versus competition. And I think there's a funny word that combines collaboration and competition, but I can't think of it at the moment. So talk to us about how we do this. You kind of talk about alignment and competition. Talk to us a little bit about how we do that from where you sit.
Sure. So let me just take a step back, and we're talking a lot about culture, and that is the formula to get this done. But I want to talk about the end result for a second. Last year, we put a major focus on creating a culture of selling where it wasn't just the sales team's responsibility, and our revenue grew 40%, most of that from upsell projects that came in. So this will increase your bottom line. And that's why this is so important. We're talking about something very soft here and intangible. I mean, it's not an intangible, but to people who are just learning it, it might feel like an intangible, but it has a direct impact on the bottom line of your company. And those sales are easier to make, but it takes some work. So, and every company is different. So let me back up a second. My husband works for a very, very, very large company, and their culture in sales is about competition. Their sales managers are direct. Sometimes I hear, I wouldn't call it abusive, but sometimes I hear the way that the management talks to the team. And that just wouldn't work in my company. It works, it motivates them. They're doing really well. Doesn't work in my organization. And when we decided we wanted to do this, I had to take a big step back and think to myself, okay, what is the environment I'm going to create to make this happen? Sometimes it's competition, sometimes it's collaboration. What I know is that people are motivated in one of three ways, and everybody's motivated by these three things, but each person puts one over the others. And that is responsibility, recognition, and reward. So responsibility is that you own something and you feel empowered. Recognition is that you're recognized, whether you're getting an award or a shout out or a spot bonus. And reward is about the money. And you have to integrate a culture that combines all of those things. So one of the challenges we had historically, we always had a sales team and we had an account team. And now the challenge was that the sales team would hand off a client, make lots of promises, and they had to trust the account team to deliver it. And so there was a feedback loop, and we talked, and the salesperson would check in, but they weren't in the front line day to day with our customers, right? And of course, our account team was motivated to create a good experience, but they weren't necessarily motivated to upsell. And then I found, when I used to be in sales and operations, and we have another team member who's in sales and operations, they have a much easier time increasing their numbers because they're in front of the client all the time. So the question became, how do I create a culture? How do I, without going under, because I have to still be profitable, how do I make the sales team feel okay that they're handing off this lead and they're getting their commission in the first place, but now the account team's going to do all the upselling, and they're going to have to give away some of their commission to the account team. How do I make them feel good about that? But they're going to lose some money. And how do I make the account team feel empowered by the sales team and not feel like that they're pissed off at them now for taking some of their money? And, what we had to do was create a structure where everybody won. And of course, there was less commission to go around, but now there's more money to be made. So the commission overall number is higher. So some team members who are, reward focused, I had to pull aside and show them the formula of what this could look like in a year. For the other team members who are responsibility focused, I had to talk to them about how we were going to empower them to take bigger risks. And ultimately, it came down to training. After everybody bought in, and I talked to people individually, I talked to teams together, I talked to the company as a whole, but we had to understand what everybody was motivated by and then get buy-in on this new structure we were building, because some people lost money initially and some people were able to make more, but in the long run, we were all going to win. So we had to make sure that they understood the long game. And after we did that, the important thing was to make sure it came to fruition. So I was going to promise my salespeople, you're going to make a little bit less money now, but then eventually the account team's going to start selling more and you're going to make more without having to do any more work. But now I had to make sure the account team knew what they were doing. So this goes back to the training. If we're going to empower everyone, we've got to give them the proper training. My entire account team now goes through sales training, and we use it in our conversations as a team, as part of our culture. And it also gives an opportunity for even like our developers to understand the big picture of something. Should I be doing this? Is this the right move in the long game for our clients? Is this going to make them happy and create a good experience, even though it's going to solve my problem in the short term right now, but will it create a problem later? So it's about getting everybody to think at a higher critical level and understand how it all integrates, and making sure that as a manager and as a leader, you're identifying each person's motivation and making sure that the entire ecosystem and environment is working together to support those three things.
Beautiful. So true. And when you talk about training, I think, we have our audience has various sizes of companies, some are larger, some of them are smaller. And this might sound a little overwhelming to smaller companies, but the truth is the training, very simply, is communication and create SOPs. I mean, it's really not difficult. You can do it as you go. And, similarly at our organization, we provide operational and biz dev support, and we provide bookkeeping and financial support. And those are two very different skill sets. So I don't have any people who serve on both teams. However, we have someone above them all who account manages. And we also in 2022, our focus was on cross-selling and upselling our clients. And our increased revenue, although it was not 40%, kudos to you, was all from upselling and cross-selling. And part of what I needed to do to make my people understand the value of that was to literally get on the whiteboard and show them some math. We can upsell these clients. Here's how it goes directly to the bottom line, and here's how that impacts your year-end bonus. So I think sometimes training is, to get everyone on the team selling, we have to have a common language. That's partly mission, values, vision. And it's also helping them to understand what's good for the business. We're the business owners, we're the leaders. They might not entirely understand that. And we recently had our biggest client come on board that was not sold by me. That was a cross sell from a bookkeeping client to an admin client. And it's just phenomenal. So creating this culture where you empower your people to provide extraordinary customer experience. I mean, I know, Dan, I know you had given a sample last we spoke where in particular organization, if you can fix it for $100, you don't ask anyone. You just go ahead and fix it. So, empower your people in very specific ways. So time always goes so quickly when we're doing these things. So before we wrap up and go to our Q&A session, I'd like to hear from both of you. And Dan, I'm going to ask you first. Again, coming back to the fact that, the power is in the action. What is the one or two things you want our audience to take away from today and put into action? And then Rachel, I'll ask you the same thing.
Yeah, I always thought it was important to teach employees to know enough to be dangerous, is what I would say. So when I worked at Discover, for example, which is a huge company, and it's known for its credit cards, and that's where I was in the credit card business, but it also has home loans. There's a student loan business. There's a whole bank, a Discover Bank, that offers checking and savings accounts and all that. And the folks that I was leading on the credit card team, they didn't really need to know about all of those other things, but I wanted them to know enough to be dangerous. Because if they're at a cocktail party and they meet somebody and they say, hey, my kid's going to college in the fall, I've heard that Discover might have student loans. And then a Discover employee says, well, I don't know. I don't think we're making that sale, right? But if they say, we do have student loans. I don't know a whole lot about them, but I know who does, and I'd be happy to make a recommendation and a referral for you or introduce you to someone. That's all that has to happen. And now that person's like, wow, I'm so glad I met someone who worked at Discover. And they're going to get an intro, and it's a warm lead, and we have a much better chance of making the sale. But so often it's that first thing that happens. It's well, I don't know, that's not my department. I have no idea. Right. And that is never going to happen. Now, does that person need to be an expert in student loans? No, they just need to know enough to be able to sort of take the customer to the next spot along the journey. And I think if you look at it that way, it doesn't feel so overwhelming.
I agree.
It's just about, what do we have to know? And, another way to do this, I've seen this in large and small companies. In large companies, I would always sit down with my team when we did a quarterly earnings call, and we would listen to the call together, because that educated them on the whole business, not just the little piece they knew. In a smaller company, I've seen the CEO do a coffee chat with people, a physical coffee chat, or maybe today you do a virtual one, but where it's basically a Q&A with the CEO. Come and ask any of your questions. They've given a bit of an update of things that were going on, but it was really about allowing the employees to ask what they wanted and to learn what they wanted. What I like about this is it's different from a training, and I know training can happen in lots of different ways, but what gets me sort of nervous is when I'm like, oh God, I got to take 17 modules that are 3 hours each. And like, oh my God, nobody likes that kind of training.
That's what I'm saying. Training is often just communication.
So people learn in different ways. And I think that can be a really easy way to help people learn, is just give them access to be able to ask the questions they have.
I agree. And to the point of recognition, when that person comes back from the cocktail party and says, hey, I didn't know what to do with this, but this person's interested in student loans, we have to broadcast that. Say, Jane did this, and that's great, because we want everyone to know it's okay to be imperfect. You still did a great job. Rachel, how about you? What do you want our audience to do?
I think there's three things to think about. And some of this comes back to training, however you want to call it, communication, workshops, whatever you want it to be. First, and I mentioned this earlier when we started talking, is make sure everyone knows your value proposition. What do you do? Does my web team know what my design team is capable of? Does my design team know what my marketing team is capable of? My design team never has a reason to talk to our business automation team. They really don't. But like they need to know what they do and vice versa. Number one, do they understand the value propositions of the company and is it consistent? Number two, Dan uses the word customer service. I use the word sales. They mean the exact same thing, in my opinion, and making sure everyone on your team knows that they mean the exact same thing. If you have a good conversation early on, that leads to a much easier sale later. So knowing how that process works from start to finish, it starts with customer service, it ends with sales. And I think that salespeople cut that right down the middle, and you have two people who are thinking about it very different way and losing half the equation. So making sure we're connecting the dots and teaching the team about that. And then the third is 360 reviews. So on a regular basis, we do with our clients a voice of the customer interviews. And we do that because we want to understand that we're going to the market with the right positioning strategy. So it's a market research tool. But oh my goodness, the things we learn about the client and how their customers feel about them. Getting a third party to come in once a year or every 6 months even and say, what are they doing well? What are they not doing well? What should we know? That's huge. I mean, every time I could think about it, a huge detriment in my business in the last 15 years, it's when I wasn't paying close enough attention to an employee who didn't have the proper training and was creating a poor experience for a client. And I missed it. And it's easy to miss when you've got a lot of people working for you. So making sure you have some sort of system in place to not reprimand or spy, but to learn so you can empower. So whether that's 360 interviews or client surveys or having a salesperson to call to check in on an experience, which we do on a monthly basis, having that feedback loop in some way as a formal process in your organization is huge.
Agreed. I would say, to kind of recap what I already said, I think the first thing you need to do is if you don't have a mission, values, vision statement, you need to have one. You could do it on your own. You can bring someone in to facilitate. The second piece of that is having regular, Rachel calls them trainings. I say meetings. Make sure there's a constant conversation, regular meetings. And, Rachel also talked about making sure everyone knows your unique selling proposition. And I agree with that. In my industry, people are coming to me because they're overwhelmed. Something's not working. They don't know exactly what's wrong. So in my arena, I need to make sure my team knows what the pain looks like.
Yeah.
If they can identify the pain, we can create a solution. And I do find, because I'm no longer on the front lines, they have a more current view of what the pain really looks like and how it shows up today. So mission, values, vision, regular meetings and communication. And in my case, make sure they are familiar with what the pain looks like, because then we can create a solution. So time flies, and that is all the time we have for today, but we will now go to Q&A.